welcome to the deep dive. So, if you're listening to this, chances are you've moved way past the beginner stage of language learning. You've got the grammar down, thousands of words. Maybe you've even passed some of those, advanced certification tests.
Right, you've checked all the boxes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But there's this frustration that can creep in, isn't there? You feel like you've kind of hit a ceiling.
Yeah.
Your conversations, they still feel perhaps a little bit stiff, maybe even, I don't know, slightly robotic, especially when the subject gets really complex.
That feeling is incredibly common, and that's really what we're diving deep into today because, that C2 mastery level we're targeting, it isn't just about vocabulary volume or getting every single grammar point correct.
It's something more.
It's about integration. It's about how you leverage language to navigate human complexity, to convey profound nuance, to manage these high-stakes professional situations, and really to demonstrate genuine critical thinking.
That really is the core mission of this deep dive, then.
Yeah.
We want to move beyond just passing a test.
Yes.
We want to get to that fluid, articulate communication that feels authentic. When you hit this level, language stops feeling like an academic subject.
And it becomes a tool. A powerful strategic tool.
It's almost architectural in its structure. I like that framing.
Think of it as advanced conversational architecture. We're trying to give you the blueprints today. We're going to be analyzing how sophisticated vocabulary, advanced grammar structures like inverted conditionals, for instance.
Oh, we'll definitely get into those.
And genuine emotional intelligence all integrate, seamlessly to handle these really complex personal and professional situations.
So just to be clear, we're not just here to rattle off a list of obscure dictionary words you'll never use.
No, absolutely not. That's not the point.
We're analyzing function. We're looking at how advanced speakers use a word not just to define something, but to, say, paint a sensory picture or build emotional tension or to express a really precise, often layered psychological state.
Yes. How does it function strategically within the flow of a real conversation? That's the key question.
Okay.
So we've broken down several sophisticated high-impact dialogues from our sources. We're going to examine how the choice of specific vocabulary enhances the meaning, how speakers structure their stories with, clear narrative arcs.
And that last piece is so important.
It's the most critical part, I think. The layer of higher order thinking they demonstrate when they reflect on the implications of what they've just discussed.
Right.
It's that final step that really separates the highly proficient from the truly masterful.
We're hunting for those aha moments that, make the difference between a functional exchange and a genuinely insightful connection. But before we jump into the technical blueprint, maybe we should address the C2 journey itself, because our sources are very, very clear on this.
Yeah, I think this needs to be said right up front. Language learning, especially at this mastery level, is defined by fluctuations. It is a marathon. It's not a straight path. You are going to have highs and lows.
Yeah, you'll have those days that feel almost explosive with progress. You try a new structure, and it clicks. You feel almost frenetic with possibility. And then you hit the wall. You hit a plateau where you feel utterly stuck, like you're trying to move through quicksand, and your brain is just defaulting back to simpler structures. It's so frustrating.
And that feeling of being stalled or stuck, it's not a sign of failure. It is a normal, expected part of the process. The sheer complexity of the C2 level means you are consolidating thousands of micro skills.
So you don't always feel the progress as it's happening.
Exactly. Progress becomes cumulative mastery. Every single attempt you make to use a more sophisticated structure, every time you successfully articulate a complex or nuanced idea, it all adds up. It's building your linguistic capital, even if you don't feel it day to day.
That context is vital. It's so easy to get discouraged otherwise, thinking progress should just be this straight upward line.
So our core advice, really derived from the sources, is simple. Stay curious. Don't shy away from the tricky bits of grammar or the words that feel just slightly out of your reach.
Lean into the discomfort.
Exactly. Know that every effort you make to push your boundaries counts. We're here to distill the strategic essence of these advanced exchanges so you can start integrating these complex mechanics into your own conversational repertoire, immediately.
All right. Let's start building that first toolkit then. We're beginning with 3 powerful words that inject intensity, chaos, and a kind of sophisticated color into conversations about external events. Things like chance and pressure.
Okay, so our first word is a fantastic descriptor for those high-energy situations that have spun just a little bit out of control. The word is frenetic.
Frenetic, right. I like that. We defined it as fast and energetic, but critically, in a wilder or uncontrolled way.
Yeah.
This choice immediately elevates the description so far beyond just saying hectic.
It's the intense cousin of hectic, just as you said. I mean, if your week was hectic, you were busy, but you handled it.
You are on top of it.
You were on top of it. But if you describe your week as frenetic, you're signaling to your listener that the sheer volume and the speed of activity felt genuinely overwhelming. It implies a kind of frantic, maybe slightly disorganized state where equilibrium has been lost.
That nuance really, really matters.
Yeah.
A hectic schedule is manageable. A frenetic schedule suggests you're approaching serious cognitive overload.
Totally.
We often see this word applied to that kind of productive chaos the source material mentions, right? Like the last hour before the deadline was a period of frenetic activity. You can just picture it. Teams rushing, tasks overlapping, stress levels just spiking through the roof.
And that's exactly where the word shines in these high-stakes, high-pressure environments. The trading floor example is perfect. The trading floor became frenetic the moment the interest rate announcement dropped.
Oh, yeah.
It just conveys everything in one word. The sensory overload, the rapid-fire decision-making, the noise, the speed, the pressure, the pandemonium, it's all packed in there.
But let's pause here, because I think this is where the nuance needs a little challenging. You know, we live in a culture that sometimes celebrates being busy, right? The hustle culture.
Right.
So isn't there a risk that using frenetic always implies something negative? Can we use it to describe high-energy activity that is actually, positive or highly effective?
That's a really sharp observation, and it pushes us right to the C2 level of usage. Because while the core definition, yes, it implies wildness or loss of control, context is, as it always is, king.
Okay.
You could certainly describe, say, a dancer's movements or a creative band's stage presence as frenetic. You're talking about something incredibly expressive, high energy, bordering on chaos, and you'd mean it as a compliment. You're conveying artistry and this kind of explosive talent.
So if I were talking about a brainstorming session, I could say something like, the meeting descended into a frenetic but ultimately highly productive exchange of ideas.
Exactly. You're using that adjective, productive, to temper the chaos implied by frenetic.
I'm qualifying it.
You are qualifying it, but you have to be aware that in more formal or corporate settings, without that qualification, the word generally signals that things are on the verge of breakdown. It's a subtle linguistic risk.
And a C2 speaker knows how to manage that risk.
Right. By adding a qualifying adjective or a follow-up clause, they convey high energy, but we've got it under control rather than just, pure chaos.
Got it. It's a high-impact word, but it requires a bit of control from the speaker.
All right, moving on to our second word, which introduces this element of a fortunate chance. The word is serendipity.
Ah, such an elegant word. It means the occurrence and development of events by chance, but specifically in a happy or beneficial way. It's often summarized as the art of making fortunate discoveries by accident.
Yeah, and the key distinction here is that it's not just random luck. It's not like winning the lottery.
Right.
It requires this accidental alignment of circumstances that leads to something genuinely good, usually in a way that relates to an existing goal or a problem you've been working on.
I love the source material's focus on the prepared mind. It really emphasizes that. Finding a rare book after years of looking, tucked away in some dusty corner of an antique shop, that's serendipity. The accidental element is the finding it in that moment. But the reason it's serendipity and not just dumb luck is because of the years of intentional searching that came before it.
Absolutely. Think about huge research breakthroughs. Penicillin, for instance. Fleming didn't plan for mold to land on his culture plate. That was an accident.
Right.
But the accident only became a beneficial discovery because he was observing, he was prepared, and he was actively working on related problems. That combination preparedness meeting accidental good fortune, that is the soul of serendipity.
It requires a certain intellectual humility, doesn't it? The willingness to admit that the discovery wasn't all planned out, but that you kind of stumbled upon it.
Yes, and the ability to recognize the significance of the accident when it happens. A less advanced speaker might just say, I got lucky. A C2 speaker uses serendipity to explain a much more complex mechanism of accidental success. It's this fusion of effort and chance.
Okay. And finally, a word that perfectly captures that feeling of information overload, which feels intensely relevant in the modern context.
Inundated. This is a beautifully strong verb. It means being overwhelmed by a massive amount of something, feeling completely swamped, like you're drowning, or being submerged by a flood.
It definitely paints a much more visceral picture than just saying, I have too many tasks, or I'm really busy.
The strength of inundated is that the input has gone past your ability to process it. Your resources, your time, your bandwidth, your cognitive capacity are completely submerged.
The classic example we saw was perfect. Returning from my 2-week vacation, I was completely inundated with over 500 unread emails.
That is modern professional stress captured in a single word. It captures the stress of sheer volume perfectly. It feels like this external force is just pressing down on you.
And it's important to remember, as the sources point out, that the content itself doesn't have to be negative, right?
Right. That's a crucial distinction. An artist can be inundated with collaboration offers after a hit song. A small coffee shop might be inundated with positive reviews and new customers after a great article.
So it's the volume.
It's the sheer, overwhelming volume that creates the pressure, regardless of the quality of the input.
Okay, so we have our toolkit. Frenetic for that chaotic busyness that's approaching the breaking point. Serendipity for when intentional effort meets fortunate chance. And inundated for being overwhelmed by sheer volume. Let's see how they work together to craft a really compelling narrative in our first dialogue.
All right, so the dialogue starts with David, and he's clearly exhausted. He sets the scene immediately by deploying 2 of our strategic words right away. His week has been absolutely frenetic, and he feels inundated because he's got 3 massive reports due on Friday.
And right there, the sophisticated vocabulary isn't just window dressing. It's not just to sound smart. It establishes his exact state and the immediate conflict overload for the listener.
Yes, and Sarah, his counterpart, acknowledges that stress, which establishes a shared reality. Then David pivots to the core narrative, the story about Jennifer from accounting, and they make sure to establish the agony first.
Right, the setup. Jennifer is searching for an apartment in a notoriously unforgiving market.
They absolutely build the stakes. David mentioned she was thoroughly swamped and despondent. You could even argue that the sheer volume of negative input and rejections had, well, inundated her morale.
And setting the high stakes first is such a defining feature of advanced narrative, isn't it? It just ensures the payoff feels significant.
It's crucial. So Jennifer is at her lowest point. She's stressed, complaining on the phone in a local cafe. And then the catalyst arrives.
A complete stranger, Lisa, overhears her.
Right. And Lisa is moving abroad and needs an urgent lease transfer. David calls the outcome a remarkable piece of serendipity.
And he justifies using that specific word through highly specific details. It wasn't just any apartment.
No.
It was 2 blocks from the office. It had a balcony, which is a huge bonus for her. And it was perfectly within her specific budget. It was the perfect alignment, totally by chance. That is the definition of serendipity in action.
But the conversation doesn't start there, and this is the important part. David then adds the C2 layer of critical analysis, what he calls the ironic twist.
Right. This is where it gets really interesting. He points out that Jennifer almost never goes to that cafe. She normally brings her lunch from home. So why did she forget it that day?
Because her work week had been so incredibly frenetic.
So the very chaos and stress that nearly broke her, the frenetic pace, directly catalyzed the solution to her housing crisis.
The chaos was the unintended precursor to the fortune. David explicitly draws that line for the listener, connecting the 2 key vocabulary words.
Okay, let's unpack the linguistic engine he used to deliver that insight, because this is a key piece of C2 grammar. David delivers the rhetorical punch by saying, had she not forgotten her lunch, she'd never have met Lisa. He didn't use the simpler, more common, if she had not forgotten her lunch.
That is the inverted conditional, and it is a hallmark of high fluency and command. Using structures like had she not, or were I to, or should you need, by placing that auxiliary verb at the start, it signals not just command over the grammar, but a specific stylistic choice.
I understand the technical structure, but let's address the challenge here for a learner. Doesn't that risk sounding overly formal? I mean, if a C2 learner starts using inverted conditionals all the time, they might just sound like they're reading from a legal document or something.
That's an excellent point. It's a real risk.
So when is the right moment for this kind of rhetorical punch?
Overuse definitely sounds unnatural and stilted. The inverted conditional is best deployed sparingly. Usually in a counterfactual structure like this one, when the speaker wants to emphasize the contrast or the condition in a particularly elegant, concise way, it adds weight.
So it's about impact.
It's about impact. If David had said, if she hadn't forgotten her lunch, she wouldn't have met Lisa, the meaning is identical, but the rhetorical impact is lessened. It's just a bit flatter.
So the C2 skill is knowing when to choose the standard form for smooth, informal flow, and when to pull out the inversion for greater impact, for elegance, and to really emphasize the consequence.
Precisely. It shows real stylistic command. It turns the statement into a highlight moment in the narrative.
Okay, now let's look at the actual flow of the dialogue itself. It felt really dynamic even when David was telling this long anecdote. Why was that?
It didn't feel like a monologue.
Right.
And that's because Sarah, the listener in the story, was constantly contributing through skillful back-channeling and discourse markers. Intermediate speakers often miss this. They wait for their turn to talk.
They're just loading up their next sentence?
Exactly. A less advanced speaker might just use generic confirmation sounds like uh-huh, uh-huh. But Sarah used specific phrases to signal she was actively processing, validating David, and even helping to guide the narrative forward.
What are some examples she used that really demonstrated that high fluency?
Well, instead of a simple, oh, really, she might say something like, oh, this sounds like it's heading in an interesting direction, which conveys anticipation.
It pulls the story out of him.
It does. Or after the twist, she says, that's incredible. So the high-pressure environment actually catalyzed the breakthrough. That last one is crucial. It shows she's synthesizing the information and articulating the thematic core of the story immediately.
She's doing intellectual work while she's listening. And this active, high-level listening, it leads directly into the thematic development of the conversation itself.
Mm-hmm.
The story didn't just end with Jennifer getting the apartment.
No, it pivoted. It shifted from just, simple complaining about their frenetic work stress to a much more philosophical outlook. They processed the implication of serendipity together, moving from just describing a problem to finding a shared meaning.
That ability to generalize, to take a specific anecdote and extract a broader principle from it, that is the critical thinking layer we're always looking for in C2 discourse.
It is. David then applied the moral of Jennifer's story to his own situation, wondering aloud if his own frenetic week might also lead to some unexpected boons, as he put it.
It transforms the conversation from just gossip or reporting into a mutual exploration of themes like chance, stress, and hope. This is what we mean by using language to explore psychological and philosophical ideas together, not just to exchange facts.
Okay, so we've tackled the language of external chaos and chance. Now let's switch our focus to the vocabulary needed for navigating that trickier internal terrain. Relational dynamics, emotional states, and delicate social boundaries.
We're moving inward now, focusing on the micro details of how people interact, what they might be hiding, and how they assert themselves. And our first word is key to spotting those deeper emotional currents. Subtle.
Subtle. It describes something so delicate or precise that it's difficult to analyze or describe. It really requires discernment. It implies a nuance that an untrained eye or an untrained ear might entirely miss.
It's all about the understated but highly significant details. The source material mentions a subtle shift in his demeanor. That means the change was barely noticeable. Maybe a flicker of tension in the jaw, a nervous laugh that didn't quite land, a slight deflection of a question. C2 speakers notice, and they often comment on, these behavioral cues.
And this word is essential because so much of advanced communication is nonverbal. If a person says they are fine, but you notice a subtle hesitation in their voice or a subtle avoidance of eye contact, you know the nonverbal message is the significant one.
It's the real message.
It's the real message. We also use it aesthetically, of course, when describing complex sensory experiences. A wine connoisseur detecting a subtle note of oak, for example.
Excellent. Next word on our list, reluctant.
Reluctant, unwilling or hesitant, disinclined. But the nuance here is so crucial. It suggests internal resistance or doubt, often driven by caution or fear or conflicting feelings. It's not just straightforward opposition. It captures that internal friction a person experiences.
Right. So if someone is reluctant to delegate a task, it's not necessarily about the competence of their team members. It might be about their own deeply ingrained sense of personal responsibility or a fear of losing control.
Exactly. The word is perfect for capturing the psychology of avoidance when it stems from an internal conflict.
And that internal conflict, that reluctance, is what often leads to the next word being so desperately needed.
It is. The antidote, in a way.
Assertive. This is the skill of expressing your views or your needs clearly and respectfully with confidence.
And the distinction here has to be crystal clear. Assertive is the middle ground. It's steering away from being passive, which is silence, or just giving in and aggressive, which is hostility and demands. It's about creating clear boundaries, but maintaining respect for the other person.
Let's address a common difficulty with that, though, the cultural perception. In some corporate or even social cultures, setting a clear boundary, even when you do it respectfully, is still sometimes perceived negatively as being difficult.
It's true.
So how does a C2 speaker manage that reality while still remaining assertive?
That's where the C2 strategy comes in. True assertiveness at this level often involves preemptive validation and framing. You don't just state your boundary out of nowhere. You explain why it's necessary in a way that respects a shared goal.
Can you give an example of that?
Sure. You might say, in order to ensure I deliver this project on time, that's the validation of the shared goal, I need to be assertive about protecting my afternoons for focused work, that's the boundary, so I won't be checking emails between 2 and 4.
So you frame the boundary as a strategic necessity for the team's success, not just a personal preference.
Exactly. It establishes professional respect and, critically, it prevents you from constantly feeling inundated by demands, which brings us full circle to our first set of words.
It all connects.
Okay.
So subtle for the nuance, the hard to spot details, reluctant for that internal hesitation or doubt, and assertive for confident, clear, respectful communication. Let's see them collide in our next dialogue where Emma and Jake are navigating the delicate issue of money and friendship.
This scenario is so high stakes because money, especially when finances are tight, is just fraught with emotional difficulty and that shame barrier.
Yeah. The setup is clear. Emma is celebrating a big birthday, and she was being assertive about wanting to go to this very expensive restaurant, La Bernarda.
And the problem immediately surfaces. Jake confesses that he is profoundly reluctant to go. He reveals he's under serious financial strain because of a significant pay cut. But the critical layer here is that he'd been deeply reluctant to mention it at all. He was afraid he'd become a burden or compromise the friendship.
That hits on the psychological core of avoidance right there. His reluctance is fueled by shame, the fear of appearing diminished in the eyes of his friend. He's prioritizing maintaining this illusion of financial parity over open communication, even though maintaining that illusion is causing him intense anxiety.
And this is where Emma's emotional intelligence, her C2 layer, activates. She tells Jake he'd been remarkably subtle about it. She admits she had noticed those nonverbal cues.
Let's focus on those subtle cues for a moment. What specific concrete behaviors might Jake have been exhibiting that would have alerted Emma to his internal struggle, even when he thought he was hiding it? This is vital for listeners who want to deepen their own nonverbal comprehension.
Our sources suggest several things. Subtle cues are often these little financial micro-behaviors. Maybe Jake started consistently choosing the cheapest wine when they dined out, or he hesitated just for a split second when pulling out his wallet.
Or he suddenly became vague about future plans that involved travel or money.
Exactly. Maybe he was less willing to split an expensive Uber, instead insisting on walking. These small, observable changes in behavior, registered over weeks, are what alert an astute observer like Emma that something is wrong.
So she connects his recent reluctance about social spending with this deeper financial reality. And Jake uses the C2 term, subtle yet palpable sense of shame, to describe the emotional weight of his situation.
Yes, and subtle there captures that pervasive, heavy psychological state, not just simple embarrassment. And then the conversation takes its amazing dramatic turn, the reveal of mutual reluctance.
This is the best part. Emma, who was so assertive about booking the expensive venue, admits she was also reluctant to go.
It's incredible. She found the atmosphere too impersonal and only pushed for it out of a sense of obligation for a big birthday, when she secretly would have preferred something more intimate.
This is such a profound insight into human communication failure. Both of them were experiencing reluctance, Jake because of necessity, Emma because of preference. But neither one was assertive enough to state their genuine needs. They were operating entirely on unspoken, inaccurate assumptions about what the other person wanted.
And it's only the open, assertive communication, which was triggered by Jake's vulnerability, that breaks the cycle. They immediately pivot to the intimate, home-cooked dinner solution,
which perfectly meets both their real needs and their values. The superficial demand for extravagance, which was causing anxiety for both of them, is removed, and the core shared value of friendship and intimacy is reinforced.
That is effective relational problem solving. And Emma's emotional intelligence, her EI, was just crucial. She didn't dismiss his reluctance. She validated his feelings.
Validation is the prerequisite for C2 conflict resolution, isn't it? When Jake finally took that vulnerable step, Emma's response was effectively, "I sensed something was up, and I'm genuinely glad you trust me enough to tell me." That immediate creation of safety strengthens the relationship, rather than weakening it.
Let's contrast that with a low proficiency response. A B1 response might sound practical but cold. Oh, well, that's annoying. Can you just use a credit card?
It completely misses the emotional core.
And a B2 response might offer basic empathy, but then shift the burden back to him. I'm sorry that's happening, but now I have to figure out the cancellation fee.
Right. Whereas Emma's C2 response immediately moved into mutual accommodation. We are friends, and we will figure this out together. Her assertiveness was then focused on finding an alternative that respected his financial boundary and, as it turned out, her own preference for intimacy.
This really highlights the practical necessity of modeling assertive language. Jake's impulse was to avoid. Let's provide our listeners with the C2 alternative he could have used proactively before it became a crisis.
Yes, let's build that script. But before we do, let's reflect on the difficulty. Jake's impulse was driven by shame. If that shame is still there, how does he deliver an assertive script without cracking under the pressure?
That's the key distinction. C2 language requires C2 emotional control. You have to process the internal conflict, the reluctance, before you can execute the assertive language. If he hadn't fully accepted his situation, the words would have come out mumbled or passive-aggressive.
Right. The linguistic skill is underpinned by emotional processing.
Okay, so, assuming Jake has done that work, here is the model for assertive communication in this delicate scenario. It starts by acknowledging the other person's effort.
Give us the model.
You could say, Emma, that's really thoughtful of you, and I appreciate you being so assertive about booking La Bernarda for your big birthday.
So step one, validation of her effort.
Exactly. Then, look, I need to be upfront and transparent with you. Due to a significant change at work, my financial situation is very different right now.
That's the clear boundary statement.
Then the collaborative proposal. I'm being assertive about this because I truly want to celebrate properly with you, and for me to do that comfortably, we'd need to find a significantly more budget-conscious option. I was wondering if maybe we could turn your place into La Bernarda for the night. We could cook together.
That is brilliant architecture. It uses the word assertive to define his own position. It validates her. It sets a non-negotiable boundary. My financial situation is very different, without over-explaining or apologizing unnecessarily. And it ends with a solution that focuses on their shared experience.
It reframes the entire discussion from Jake has a problem to we have a planning challenge. The danger in their initial mutual reluctance was those unspoken assumptions.
They were both trying to please an imagined version of the other person. Only by deciding to be open and assertive, to stop being so subtle about their true feelings, did they reach a solution that actually fit their real, shared values.
And we noted Jake's final growth step. He realizes his initial avoidance caused all this anxiety and subtle shame. And by finally choosing to be assertive, he frees himself. His C2 move is deciding to be assertive with the entire friend group, turning his vulnerability into a potential shared strength. He's modeling honesty for others who might be silently struggling.
That's maturity. Language mastery enabling genuine self-advocacy and deeper integrity. We've seen how to navigate internal reluctance and assert boundaries. Now, let's move to conversations of a more existential nature.
Right. When people discuss radical life changes, leaving a career, moving across the world, the language must carry a profound philosophical weight. You need words that capture the gravity of the decision.
Yeah, if someone says, I quit my job because it was boring, that's transactional. But if they frame it as an existential realignment, the stakes immediately jump. We need vocabulary that elevates the discussion to a genuine crisis of conscience.
And let's start with the word that acts as the engine for that kind of radical change. Epiphany.
Epiphany. It's a moment of sudden, great revelation or insight that is genuinely transformative. It's not just a passing thought. It fundamentally rewrites your internal map.
That distinction is crucial. An idea is something you consider. An epiphany is something that compels action. It provides this absolute, almost startling clarity that justifies a radical shift in direction. If you use this word in a conversation, you're signaling to your listener that the change is non-negotiable and it's internally driven.
The source material nailed the contrast. It's not just realizing that business needs change, but having an epiphany about the sheer futility of his corporate ambitions.
That's a total realization. It means the success itself is the problem. It absolutely justifies the intensity of the subsequent dialogue. The person feels justified, almost morally obligated, to pursue this new path, regardless of the external consequences.
Okay, so epiphany is the force driving the change. But these conversations need balance. You can't just operate on pure revelation. You need an anchor.
Which brings us to pragmatic.
Pragmatic. Dealing with problems based on practical, sensible solutions rather than theories or ideals. This is the realist anchor in the conversation.
The pragmatic viewpoint is all about grounding things. It's the mechanism for turning a powerful epiphany into a manageable plan. It's not about killing the dream, but about figuring out how to pursue the dream without catastrophic failure.
So it reframes a tough choice as a necessary imperative. It strips away some of the emotional charge and focuses on realistic outcomes. A pragmatic approach to an epiphany about quitting your job isn't quitting tomorrow.
Right. It's calculating the severance, determining how long the savings will last, and creating a structured step-by-step transition plan.
And if you fail to be pragmatic, you run straight into the third word, the one that captures the fear of letting go of security. Precarious.
Precarious. It just screams instability. Not securely held, dependent on chance, uncertain, fragile.
It evokes a sense of fragility, like the whole foundation under you is shaky. It gives a concrete name to the fear of starting over or facing financial uncertainty. That line about freelance artists living a financially precarious existence, it immediately communicates that gnawing day-to-day instability.
And it's the word Chloe will deploy to anchor Liam's abstract sense of meaninglessness in concrete, tangible reality.
So we have the weight of epiphany driving the discussion, pragmatic defining the sensible approach, and precarious highlighting the risk.
Okay, so Liam, the new law firm partner, feels hollow. He enters the dialogue using very specific C2 phrasing, framing his problem not as a simple job complaint, but as a crisis of conscience, and his success as a golden cage.
That's a strategically brilliant linguistic move right there. He's telling his partner, Chloe, don't tell me to look at the money. The money is the trap. He's preemptively countering the standard response. But you're so successful.
And Chloe, recognizing the depth and the power of his epiphany, can't just dismiss it. But her role in the conversation is to be the constructive antagonist. She has to pivot immediately to the pragmatic reality.
She might say something like, Liam, I hear the power of this epiphany, and I know it feels transformative. But we have to be pragmatic right now. That golden cage pays the mortgage and funds our future. If you walk away without a plan, that financial security immediately becomes incredibly precarious.
She uses precarious to make the risk tangible, forcing him to look at the instability. But Liam doesn't just agree, he pushes back, and this is key. He challenges her definition of what is truly pragmatic.
This is the intellectual weight needed for a real C2 discussion. Liam counters with something like, but Chloe, is it truly the most pragmatic choice to sentence myself to 40 more years of guaranteed despair merely to maintain a status quo that makes me deeply unhappy?
It's a great question.
Is a life defined only by solvency at the expense of my psychological well-being truly the most practical long-term strategy for survival and happiness?
He's brilliantly flipping the definition on its head. He forces her to acknowledge that pragmatism should extend beyond immediate financial calculations to long-term emotional and existential utility. He's arguing that minimizing long-term despair is the ultimate pragmatic choice, even if it introduces some short-term precariousness.
That debate is pivotal. It softens Chloe's stance. She stops trying to talk him out of the feeling and starts grappling with how they can navigate the consequences. She validates his feelings, but maintains her realism.
And this shift from opposition to joint problem solving is the definition of maturity in a crisis conversation. She hasn't abandoned her pragmatic concerns. She's now applying them to his goal, designing a safe transition.
Her solution is structured and pragmatic, designed specifically to mitigate the precarious elements of his plan. She might suggest, instead of quitting next week, what if we use your accumulated leave for a 6-month sabbatical? We commit to you spending 3 concentrated hours every Saturday and Sunday building that new portfolio. We test the hypothesis of the epiphany.
She's forcing him to test the reality of the dream, ensuring the change isn't based on an emotional whim. And then she introduces the guiding metaphor, the bridge.
Reframing the challenge around building a bridge to a new life rather than jumping off a cliff. I think the power of that metaphor lies in its structural implication.
Absolutely. Jumping implies an instant, irreversible, precarious action. Building a bridge implies structure, planning, calculated progression, and effort. It transforms the overwhelming emotional dilemma, should I destroy my current life, into a manageable engineering problem. How do we design and fund the construction of this transition safely?
And the conversation also uses advanced C2 syntax to manage that danger zone. Liam uses counterfactual conditionals to explore the risks analytically, saying something like, if I were to leave right now without that sabbatical, the immediate consequence would undoubtedly be significant financial instability for both of us.
Using language this way allows them to wargame the worst-case scenario intellectually. The language itself acts as a tool for de-risking the epiphany. They can analyze the danger without being paralyzed by the emotional fear.
So the vocabulary acted as a kind of strategic architecture. Epiphany defined the non-negotiable why, precarious defined the financial threat, and pragmatic guided the how, the actual construction of the bridge.
It's powerful. Now we're going to switch gears one last time, moving from personal existential decisions to the highly specific, high-stakes world of professional conflict and repair.
Workplace conflict is so treacherous because a badly handled disagreement can damage trust far more quickly than any project failure. The language required here needs to be surgical design for de-escalation, prevention of accusation, and systemic repair.
We need tools that separate action from intent and emotion from fact. And the first indispensable word for conflict management is misconstrue.
Its definition is simple: to interpret words or actions incorrectly. But its strategic value is just enormous.
Because it immediately shifts the focus away from character and blame. Instead of saying, you deliberately went around me, you create a separation. You say, here's what I did, action X, and here's how it seems you interpreted it, perception Y, let's fix the communication gap.
It implicitly places the fault not on the person, but on the interpretation process. You're validating the listener's negative feeling. I can see why you thought that was an attack, while asserting your own different, usually benign intent, but that was not my goal.
It builds a bridge for understanding without forcing immediate blame. It's the highest level of de-escalation. You are saying, let's agree on my intent, even if we disagree on the action I took.
Okay, next essential tool, conciliatory.
Conciliatory. This means adopting an approach intended specifically to gain goodwill and reduce hostility. It's a strategic choice of tone that signals your highest priority is relationship repair, not winning the argument.
It's the verbal equivalent of showing open hands. Sending a conciliatory email after a tense meeting signals to the other party, despite our disagreement, I value our ongoing collaboration and I respect you. It manages the long-term outcome.
Without a conciliatory opening, any attempt to resolve a conflict can be immediately misconstrued as further aggression or defensiveness. Tone sets the stage for everything that follows.
And the third word, perfect for introducing facts and inconsistencies without personalization. Discrepancy.
Discrepancy. An illogical or surprising lack of compatibility between two facts. An inconsistency. This word is objective, almost clinical.
And its strategic value is in removing the personal sting. So instead of saying, Mark, you messed up the budget numbers, which is accusatory,
Right.
You say, Mark, I've noticed a discrepancy of $5,000 between the actual spend and the projected figures. Can we look at that data together?
It transforms the problem from you lied or you failed into there's a puzzle we must solve together. The focus stays on the data, the facts, the system, not the character of the individual.
Okay, so our toolkit for professional repair: misconstrue, to clarify intent without blame; conciliatory for a strategic tone of repair; and discrepancy for objective inconsistency identification. Let's see, Mark and Sophie use these tools to repair trust.
The conflict setup is a classic one. Sophie is frosty because Mark bypassed their collaborative process and sent a key report section directly to the director. Mark knows he damaged trust and needs immediate surgical repair.
Mark's opening move is the textbook conciliatory approach. He addresses the tension proactively, saying something like, Sophie, I need 5 minutes. I want to clear the air about the quarterly update. I value our working relationship too much to let this tension linger. I'd rather address it proactively.
He's established the tone right away. Repair, not confrontation. Sophie, who is still feeling slighted, responds by pointing out the issue objectively using discrepancy. She avoids personal attack.
She might say, Mark, thank you for bringing it up. What felt off with the apparent discrepancy between how we normally work reviewing key findings together and then seeing that initial finding sent directly to the director without my input. She targets the system inconsistency, not his intent.
Now Mark has his opening, and he immediately validates her feeling while deploying the powerful misconstrue finesse. Let's break down the strategic maneuver.
Okay, step 1. Validation. He acknowledges her feeling.
Mark would say, "You are absolutely right to feel taken aback by that, and I see exactly how it must have looked from your perspective." He's validating her experience, not her conclusion.
Step 2. Assertion of benign intent. And Step 3. A subtle challenge to her conclusion, all rolled into one C2 sentence using misconstrue.
Mark, please don't misconstrue that action as me trying to grab credit or go around you. That was honestly not my intention at all. My motive was solely tied to managing the director's timeline.
This is critical. He validated her right to feel upset, but he corrected the narrative she had created internally. He shifts from being defensive to being explanatory, which creates the necessary space for him to provide context.
And then he gives the context. I'd actually sent you 3 emails asking for input. When I hadn't heard back and I knew the director expected a preliminary finding, I started to panic. My only goal was to prevent the director from thinking we were stalled.
The context changes everything. Now, let's analyze Sophie's mature response. This is where advanced emotional literacy really shines. She owns her communication failure.
She responds, "Okay, thanks for explaining. I need to own my part in this too. I was completely inundated this week, ruthlessly triaging emails. I failed to communicate that I couldn't look at your input yet."
And then she focuses on her internal filter, not on his wrongdoing. She says, "I apologize for my frosty reaction. I saw your action entirely through the lens of my own stress and feeling overwhelmed. I kind of projected my pressure onto your intentions."
That is the ultimate C2 move in a conflict. They both successfully navigated away from accusing each other and arrived at a shared systemic failure. They realized their process relying on asynchronous email under frenetic pressure was what broke down.
Let's dedicate a moment to that shift from you statements to your I statements, which is so foundational to this success. A less skilled Mark might have said, "You ignored my 3 emails. That made me panic."
Which assigns blame and forces defensiveness. The skilled Mark focused on his internal state and his actions. "I had sent 3 emails. Because of my own anxiety about the timeline, I made the clumsy decision to submit the findings." He takes ownership of his internal process.
And Sophie mirrored that perfectly. She focused on her perception. "I saw your action through the lens of my stress." This profound shift, focusing on how I process the action rather than what you did wrong, is where genuine psychological maturity transforms a conversation.
The real measure of their success is the structural solution they came to. They don't just apologize and move on. They identified the weak point, the reliance on email assumptions, and designed a better system.
A proactive, mandatory 5-minute sync-up every Thursday morning, regardless of workload.
They engineered a solution to prevent future discrepancy and future misconstruing, and they sealed the conversation by explicitly reaffirming the value of their partnership. The relationship actually came out stronger because of the precision of their language.
Whether it was Liam and Chloe navigating a powerful personal epiphany with pragmatic steps,
Or Mark and Sophie using conciliatory language, clarifying a potential misconstruing, and identifying a factual discrepancy, the common thread is that advanced communication demands strategy.
it requires using these words as active, strategic tools to manage emotions, define problems objectively, and collaboratively engineer better outcomes. It really is the difference between just having a conversation and strategically designing one with intent.
Well put.
We've covered a massive amount of ground today, from the chaotic external world defined by frenetic activity and moments of serendipity to the delicate internal landscapes of professional trust and existential decisions.
We analyze how these advanced vocabulary choices, inundated, reluctant, assertive, pragmatic, precarious, provide the necessary precision to express the full, nuanced self. We saw how C2 mastery is really about using these linguistic tools like precision instruments to build better connections and stronger outcomes.
I think the core takeaway is clear. Advanced communication demands strategy, genuine empathy, and linguistic precision. C2 mastery is about integrating all three to achieve truly exceptional results. I keep thinking of Chloe's metaphor. This kind of strategic analysis helps you design and build the bridge from proficiency to mastery.
You now have some strategic blueprints for handling high-stakes relational challenges and profound personal changes, and this knowledge is directly transferable to your own life.
So here is a provocative final thought for you to carry forward. Think back to that powerful transformative shift we saw when Jake moved from being overly subtle and crippled by reluctance and shame to being respectfully assertive.
We want you to challenge yourself right now. Identify one specific area in your own life. Maybe it's a work boundary you've been avoiding, a tricky financial conversation you've been dreading, or a personal commitment you feel profoundly reluctant about.
Now ask the crucial question. Where could being just a little bit more assertive using that clear, respectful C2 kind of language we modeled today, where could that potentially generate an unexpected positive piece of serendipity for you?
Maybe stating your needs clearly could unlock an opportunity, or a less stressful arrangement, or a deeper relational connection you hadn't even considered. It's a challenging question, but it's an exciting one too.
Reflect on that distinction we made between an action and an interpretation. See every conversation as an opportunity to consciously choose a conciliatory opening or preemptively clarify your intent using a word like misconstrue. Stay curious, keep refining your strategic communication skills, and enjoy the mastery journey.
Well said. Until next time on The Deep Dive.
Welcome back to The Deep Dive. In our last sessions, we've really been tackling some of the linguistic heavy hitters.
We have.
Words like epiphany and misconstrue. And those are fantastic tools. They're like floodlights, really.
I like that analogy.
They help you define these really clear boundaries when you're navigating big life decisions, or even just workplace friction where the conflict is already out in the open.
Precisely. Those words are for moments that demand a certain kind of definition, a resolution. But if we're thinking about communication as, say, climbing a mountain,
okay,
then today we're kind of moving past the base camp. We're past the point of just defining facts, and we're entering that altitude where, well, the air gets a little thin.
And the terrain gets messy.
Terrain gets very messy. We are moving into what we call the gray area moments.
The gray area, I know that place. It's that zone where there isn't a clear, predefined right or wrong answer. It's not about finding the truth. It's more about navigating this really complex, multi-layered reality where, different perspectives are colliding, people's real motivations might be hidden. Everything is just highly nuanced.
And that, for us, is really the ultimate test. It's the crucible for what we call advanced proficiency. This is the C2 mastery challenge.
All right.
Because, almost anyone can sound competent when the facts are black and white. But the true test of your influence, of your strategic capacity, is being absolutely precise when the situation itself is, when it's inherently messy.
When it's subjective.
Highly subjective. Or intentionally ambiguous.
So if these messy situations are, let's say, the dense city streets of professional communication, we need more than just a regular map.
You need something more dynamic.
We need a high-resolution strategic GPS. And that is exactly what we've put together for you today. 3 power words that really act as foundational tools for building what we're calling sophisticated conversational architecture.
And I want to be clear, these are not just vocabulary upgrades. That's not the point. Think of them as strategic instruments.
Instruments for what?
For influence, for clarity, and I think most importantly, for diffusing potential conflict before it even has a chance to reach a boiling point.
Okay, so what are they?
We are diving deep into equivocal, cognizant, and ameliorate.
Equivocal, cognizant, and ameliorate.
Consider these your high-level toolset for engineering better professional outcomes.
All right, let's get into it. I want to unpack this first tool, equivocal. Now, if I just open a dictionary, the first thing I'm probably going to see is uncertain or maybe ambiguous.
Correct.
And honestly, that makes it sound a little bit weak, a bit passive. It sounds like an adjective you'd use to describe a politician who's, dodging a tough question on TV.
And, well, that politician example is actually pretty accurate in one sense, but it completely misses the strategic nuance that you have to grasp for this C2 level of mastery.
Yeah.
In a high-stakes professional conversation, equivocal doesn't just mean uncertain. The way we define it, it's language, or even an action that is open to more than one interpretation. And here's the key insight. This state of non-committal ambiguity is often, I would argue, usually, intentionally so.
Okay. The intentionality. That changes everything.
It's the whole game.
Because that's the lever that turns this word from just a descriptive adjective into a powerful strategic challenge.
Exactly. It embodies the language of hedging your bets, of minimizing your own liability, of keeping all your options open without having to deliver a hard truth or make a firm, accountable promise.
And you see this everywhere in corporate life.
It is pervasive, especially when you're dealing with budgets, with timelines, with any kind of personnel decision. It's a way for one person to sound positive and supportive while committing absolutely zero organizational resources.
It's the ultimate maybe.
It is. It's a very sophisticated maybe.
So let's ground this in a real-world scenario. Let's use the detailed professional context we designed. the case of Mark's promotion negotiation.
Perfect.
So Mark is a high-performing team lead. He's built a really compelling case for a promotion. He's got the data, the results, and he asks his manager for a definitive timeline. He wants to know when this is going to happen.
And the manager, let's call her Sarah, she's in a tough spot. She knows Mark is incredibly valuable, but maybe the budget committee hasn't approved the headcount yet, or she's waiting on some external hiring data.
So she can't give him a hard yes right now.
She can't, but she also can't afford to lose him. So she needs to manage his expectations without damaging the relationship. So what does she do? She delivers the classic equivocal response.
Let's hear it.
She leans forward, gives this very genuine sounding smile and says, "Mark, you're doing stellar work, truly. We'll look into the promotion possibilities in the near future."
Ugh, the near future. That is just, it's conversational smoke.
It is absolute peak obfuscation.
It is designed to give you this immediate positive feeling, right? There's a verbal pat on the back. But its real purpose is to end the conversation without creating any conflict, or more importantly, any accountability for.
Absolutely. The problem isn't that Sarah doesn't want to promote Mark. She probably does. The problem is that near future is a linguistic ghost. You can't pin it down.
It's the quintessential example of an equivocal statement.
It is, because its meaning is entirely malleable. It stretches and shrinks to fit whatever she needs it to be. If Mark asks her again in 3 months, what can she say?
That's still the near future.
Exactly. And if she ends up denying him the promotion in a year, she can argue that a year is near relative to the company's 5-year strategic plan.
So it commits her to absolutely nothing. It places all of the burden of patience, of interpretation, squarely on Mark's shoulders.
Right. It strategically shields her from any kind of accountability while letting her maintain this veneer of being a supportive manager.
And this really highlights the strategic meaning of equivocal that you mentioned. It doesn't mean I don't have the information.
No. It means I am consciously using language that provides me with a maximum flexibility and prevents you from pinning me down to a specific date or a specific resource.
And that ambiguity is the enemy of any kind of professional planning.
It is.
So let's talk about the countermove. If Mark is operating at that C2 level of proficiency, he doesn't just walk away frustrated. I mean, the common reaction would be emotional, right? You'd think, my manager is stalling me, or she doesn't value my work.
That's the default reaction, and it's completely understandable.
So how does he shift that emotional reaction into a strategic countermove?
That is the critical distinction we want you to internalize. A truly proficient speaker doesn't just react to the frustration, they identify the root cause of the frustration.
Which in this case is the language itself.
It's the lack of linguistic clarity. It's her strategic use of ambiguity. So the professional countermove is to actually use the word equivocal itself to force her to be clear.
Okay, hold on. Let me just challenge that for a second.
Please.
Isn't that a bit risky? Using a word like equivocal, which is, it's pretty formal, it's kind of academic, doesn't that sound aggressive in a one-on-one meeting like this?
That is a brilliant question.
I mean, isn't Mark just escalating the tension by using such a formal critique? It could sound pretentious.
It could, if handled poorly. And that speaks directly to the social calibration that's required for C2 mastery. The key is how he frames it. Tone is everything.
Okay.
Mark is not saying you are being vague or you are a liar. He's making an objective observation about the language that she chose to use.
So he's depersonalizing it.
He's professionalizing the critique. He's taking it out of the realm of personal feeling and putting it into the realm of professional standards.
So give us the exact phrasing. How does Mark use this tool to pivot from her vague reassurance to something actionable and precise?
Okay, so Mark maintains a calm, professional tone. No hint of accusation. He might say something like, "I really appreciate the positive feedback, and I'm highly encouraged by your belief in my work. However, I find that specific timeline, the near future, a bit equivocal for my own resource planning."
For my own resource planning. That's smart.
It connects it to a business need. Then he continues, "Could we perhaps establish a set of concrete, measurable milestones instead? Something like a formal review date in Q3, or maybe some budget allocation benchmarks rather than relying on a generalized time frame."
Wow. Okay, that completely transforms the temperature of the negotiation.
It reframes the entire discussion.
It moves the conversation away from, I need a promotion, which is about his personal desire, and toward a shared professional goal.
Which is establishing precision for the benefit of the team or the project. He's now a partner in planning, not just an employee asking for something.
Let's just think about the tactical brilliance of that for a second. By using the word equivocal, he elevates the whole conversation. It's no longer a personal grievance.
It's a discussion about professional standards.
He's objectively pointing out that the tool she used, vague timing, is just not suitable for the purpose, which is a professional agreement.
He is, in the most professional way possible, demanding high-fidelity communication that is commensurate with his high performance.
And the really clever part is that the manager, Sarah, can't easily push back without explicitly defending the use of ambiguity.
She's cornered professionally. If she says, no, I refuse to define milestones, she is basically admitting that she wants to retain flexibility at Mark's expense.
Which would be a terrible look for a manager.
Awful. It creates a power shift. Mark has just transferred the burden of proof back to her. The critique is no longer, I feel frustrated.
The critique is, the language you used lacks the precision we need to proceed effectively.
And that demands an actionable response. It sets a new professional boundary.
And this tool, it applies far beyond just promotions, right?
Oh, absolutely. Think about vendor relationships. Legal contracts are filled with this stuff.
Okay, give me an example.
Imagine you're signing a major contract with a new software supplier, and you find a clause deep in the terms that says, project success is contingent upon mutually satisfactory technical integration.
Size. Mutually satisfactory. I can see the red flags already.
It's a beautifully and dangerously equivocal statement. What on earth does mutually satisfactory mean?
It means whatever the vendor wants it to mean when things go wrong.
Precisely. If the technical integration fails, the vendor can just claim, well, we're satisfied with our efforts. The lack of success must be your problem. You have no recourse.
So you have to challenge that equivocation head on.
You must. So in the negotiation, you would respond by saying something like, we find the term mutually satisfactory to be highly equivocal and unenforceable. We propose substituting it with objective and measurable criteria.
And then you define them.
Specifically, successful API connectivity confirmed by a 99.9% uptime for 3 consecutive weeks, as verified by a third-party monitor.
Okay, so you're forcing specificity. You're taking this subjective, ambiguous clause that was designed to shield the vendor from risk.
And you're replacing it with non-equivocal objective metrics that protect you.
That is using equivocal not just as a descriptor, but as a strategic tool to define risk and achieve real clarity.
You've turned a vague feeling of mistrust into an objective statement. Your language is structurally non-specific, and we need better architecture. That right there is mastery of equivocal.
Okay, so Mark successfully challenged the manager's ambiguity. He's forced the conversation toward defining next steps. The ball is now back in the manager Sarah's court.
It is. But you have to imagine the trust in that room has been strained a little bit by her initial equivocal language.
Sure, Mark is now on guard.
He is. And this is where we bring in our second strategic tool, cognizant. And this has to be something much more powerful than her just saying she's aware.
It has to be. Aware feels weak in this context.
Aware is the sophisticated elder cousin of aware. It carries significantly more intellectual and professional weight.
How so?
Well, where aware just means I know a fact. Cognizant implies a much deeper, more systemic and comprehensive understanding. It's about grasping a situation's gravity, its full context, and all of its downstream impacts.
And it carries a sense of responsibility.
Crucially, in a high-stakes setting, being cognizant carries an implicit sense of professional responsibility. It's not passive knowledge.
Okay, that makes sense. Responsibility is the key.
Yeah.
If I say I'm aware of a compliance deadline, it just means I've, noted it in my calendar.
Right, it's on your to-do list.
But if I say I am cognizant of the compliance deadline, I'm signaling something much bigger. I'm saying I understand the full range of penalties, the potential reputational damage, the corrective actions we'd need to take if we miss it.
You're implying you're ready to act. That's the difference.
It's the difference between acknowledging a single data point and actually processing the full implications of that data point.
Exactly. So now let's apply this to Sarah, the manager. She has to use this word to bridge that trust gap that was created by her equivocal statement. She needs to show Mark respect and demonstrate his value immediately to repair the architectural damage in their conversation.
So she needs to validate his challenge, not just brush it off or get defensive. How does she use cognizant to rebuild that professional trust and show she really understands the weight of his performance?
She has to move past generic pleasantries. She can't just say, you're a great employee. She might reply with something like, Mark, thank you for challenging me on the timeline precision. I understand your need for concrete planning.
So she starts by validating him.
Yes. Acknowledges his point. Then she says, and I want to be very clear that I am fully cognizant of your specific instrumental contributions this year, especially how you single-handedly salvaged the recent merger project.
Ooh, she gets specific. Single-handedly salvaged the merger project.
Very specific. And then she adds the final layer. That work was critical, it was high risk, and I recognize its full weight in terms of our organizational stability.
Okay, let's just dissect the impact of that phrasing for a moment.
Let's do it.
If she had just used casual language like, I know you worked really hard on the merger, it would just feel like a generic compliment.
It would feel hollow, especially after she'd just used vague language moments before. It wouldn't land.
It would fail to validate the actual scale of Mark's effort. But when she says, I am fully cognizant, what is she really signaling there?
She's signaling that she has truly processed the magnitude of his value. She understands that salvaging the merger wasn't just a busy week for him. It was a high-stakes effort that prevented a massive organizational failure.
It might have saved millions of dollars or even some executive careers.
Absolutely. So her statement says, I see the full, complex picture of your performance. I see the gravity of it, the risk you took on, and the consequential nature of your actions. I grasp the weight.
That kind of validation, especially coming from leadership, is incredibly powerful.
It instantly rebuilds professional capital. The manager isn't just aware of Mark's existence on the team. She is cognizant of the specific, critical role he played in the company's success.
And for the employee, being recognized with that level of intellectual rigor, I mean, she's using a word that implies she gave it deep consideration. That's extremely validating.
It tells Mark his efforts weren't just seen, they were analyzed and professionally valued at the appropriate level.
So for you listening, this is the application. This word is your opportunity to signal that you understand not just the surface facts of a situation, but the deep, interconnected context, the true weight and the organizational implications of those facts.
You're moving beyond simple observation into active, responsible recognition.
Let's think about this in an even higher stakes context. Say, a major product failure.
Okay, a crisis situation.
You're a project manager. You're facing a serious bug that's already in the market. You don't walk into the boardroom and say, I am aware the widget failed the stress test.
No, that would minimize the issue and make you look naive.
Right. Instead, you would say, I am fully cognizant of the widget failure and the subsequent legal ramifications this structural weakness will have on our Q4 certification timeline and our long-term liability exposure.
Boom. You've instantly reframed the problem.
It's no longer just a technical glitch.
It's a financial, legal, and regulatory crisis. And you are the one who understands all those dimensions. That is the weight that Cognizant carries. It implies you have done the deep dive analysis necessary to take responsible action.
That's it. Now, let me ask a strategic challenge here. Why is it often so difficult for leaders to be truly cognizant of complex problems?
That's a crucial point. It's because admitting you are fully cognizant of the gravity of a situation, well, it implies ownership.
It forces you to act. You can no longer plead ignorance.
Exactly. For a new manager, or maybe an insecure one, admitting, I am fully cognizant of how this budget constraint is crushing team morale, feels dangerous. Because the next question is, okay, so what are you going to do about it?
So it's often easier to be merely aware and just hope the problem goes away by itself.
It's the path of least resistance. But Sarah, in our scenario, is demonstrating sophisticated leadership by embracing cognizance. She is taking responsibility for the feeling of unfairness Mark might have, even if she can't immediately solve the promotion issue itself.
She is demonstrating that even though her initial timeline was equivocal, her recognition of Mark's value is not.
That's a great way to put it. She's using high-level language to proactively rebuild the trust that was damaged by the prior ambiguity.
And that shift from passive knowledge to active, responsible understanding, that's the real power of Cognizant.
It is.
So the conversation has now moved from a successful ambiguity challenge with equivocal to this deep acknowledgement with Cognizant. Mark now knows his value is truly seen. But
There's a but.
Recognition doesn't pay the bills. The core conflict, which is the lack of a promotion, remains unresolved, at least in the immediate term.
That's right. And let's be clear, Sarah cannot grant the promotion today. Let's say it's due to factors totally outside her control. A mandated hiring freeze from corporate budget cuts that haven't been approved yet.
So she's in a bind. She needs to keep Mark engaged, feeling valued, and most importantly, prevent him from updating his resume and walking out the door.
She needs a strategic move to manage the gap between his very valid expectation and the immediate, disappointing reality.
And this brings us to what you're calling the ultimate conflict management tool in this architecture.
It is. And it's a beautifully active verb, ameliorate.
To ameliorate.
It means to make a bad or unsatisfactory situation better, or at least more bearable. It is the perfect word to deploy when the situation itself is structurally flawed, maybe it's imperfect or deeply disappointing, but you can still take steps to improve the condition or diffuse the tension.
Okay, let's distinguish its usage really clearly. We improve a project score, or we optimize a process.
Right, those are simple, measurable enhancements on something that's already functional.
But we use ameliorate when we're dealing with a negative, a complex, or maybe even an emotional condition.
Exactly. You ameliorate the lingering effects of a supply chain disruption. Or you ameliorate the tension in the room after a really heated boardroom debate.
So it acknowledges the underlying negativity, but it focuses on an active, tangible intervention.
It's very honest language. It doesn't pretend the problem is fixed. It says, look, the situation is bad, but we are actively working to make the experience of that bad situation better for you right now.
It's about making things more tolerable.
Yes.
So back to Sarah, our manager. She knows she has to provide some kind of tangible value to Mark now to offset the temporary denial of his promotion. How does she package the solution using the word ameliorate?
She frames a strategic counteroffer. And she defines it specifically as a mitigating action, an action designed to stabilize their professional relationship.
So what does she say?
She says, Mark, while I am fully cognizant of your readiness for this role, and given the temporary freeze on managerial headcount, I need to take steps to maintain your momentum, to ameliorate the current situation while we wait for Q3 budget approval.
Okay, so she's setting the stage
Yeah.
to ameliorate the current situation.
I can immediately offer you a $10,000 premium leadership training credit and grant you a fully flexible remote work schedule starting next week.
That is genuinely sophisticated management.
It is.
She is using a C2 level verb to signal to Mark, I see your disappointment. I acknowledge it.
Yeah.
I cannot solve the primary issue right this second, but I am taking specific, high-value, measurable steps to make this temporary delay professionally bearable for you.
And the language itself is doing a lot of the heavy lifting. By using ameliorate, she is admitting, without having to say it, that the situation is disappointing, maybe even unfair.
She takes ownership of the tension.
She does. And notice, she's not just throwing random perks at him. She is actively working to ameliorate the potential conflict.
The conflict being the risk of Mark leaving.
The risk that arose from her denying the promotion outright. This is proactive retention.
And the items she offered are key. A training credit that enhances his future market value, a flexible schedule that improves his immediate work-life balance.
They're high-value things to Mark's career and lifestyle, but they're relatively low cost to the organization compared to a full salary raise and the cost of recruiting his replacement if he leaves.
It's a perfect example of what you're calling the amelioration effect.
It is. The action itself diffuses the tension, it buys the manager necessary time, and it keeps a high-value talent engaged and feeling valued.
So they're not just delaying the issue. They're using this active, weighty verb to restructure the immediate experience. They're ensuring a positive step forward is taken, even though the main issue remains unresolved for now.
That's it, exactly. A positive step forward.
Let's use another example outside of a personnel issue, maybe something with internal team conflict.
Okay.
Let's say two departments, marketing and sales, are constantly feuding over the quality of sales leads. It's destroying morale, it's hurting efficiency.
A classic, pervasive, negative condition. And you can't just tell them to be nicer to each other.
No, and just improving the lead quality might only be a temporary fix for the symptom, not the underlying disease of mistrust.
You need a deeper intervention.
So a senior leader could step in. How would they frame their solution?
That senior leader might call a joint meeting and say, we are cognizant of the deep systemic friction between sales and marketing regarding data ownership. We recognize this is impacting overall revenue targets and team morale.
Okay, so they start with cognizant to show they understand the full scope of the problem.
Acknowledges the pain, then they pivot to the solution. Therefore, we are introducing a new joint KPI structure and monthly co-working sessions specifically designed to ameliorate the current interdepartmental tension.
That framing is perfect.
It works because the leader has named the condition, which is systemic friction. They've shown comprehensive understanding by saying they are cognizant of their revenue impact.
And then they've defined the strategic steps to make that negative condition more bearable.
Exactly. To ameliorate the tension with shared metrics and co-working. This is managing conflict through linguistic architecture. You're focusing the team on actions that improve the environment rather than letting them rehash old grievances.
So at the end of this whole exchange, Mark walks away from his manager's office knowing a few things. He knows his challenge for clarity was respected.
With equivocal.
His value is deeply recognized.
With cognizant.
And the company is willing to invest tangible resources now to make the current environment acceptable.
To ameliorate the situation.
So he feels heard. And he feels strategically managed, not just stalled or dismissed.
That's the goal.
That whole sequence, moving from the challenge to the acknowledgement to the managed resolution, that's the true value here. Let's review the full arc, because this is where the idea of conversational architecture becomes a strategic model that you can actually go out and implement.
Right. This negotiation gave us 3 distinct high-stakes conversational turns, and each one was structurally supported by one of our C2 tools.
Okay, lay them out. Step 1.
Step 1 was the challenge. Mark used the word equivocal to strategically stop that vague, non-committal language. He forced his manager to transition from ambiguity to accountability.
Step 2.
Step 2, acknowledge and validate. The manager, Sarah, used cognizant to show that she had a deep, responsible understanding of Mark's instrumental worth. That validated his professional perception, and it repaired the initial breach of trust.
And the final step.
Step 3, resolve and stabilize. The manager offered that tangible, high-value solution to ameliorate the delay and diffuse the tension. She transformed what could have been a negative outcome, no promotion, into a managed, forward-looking scenario with training and flexibility.
So this sequence really provides a blueprint. It shows that high-level communication isn't just about improvisation or winging it.
No, it's much more about strategic construction.
You're building these linguistic bridges across what can be really difficult organizational chasms like budget cuts or hiring freezes, and you're making sure the relationship stays intact even when the news is difficult.
The language itself provides the necessary framework for a professional, high-trust interaction. When you deploy these words surgically, you move negotiations past those emotional roadblocks and toward structured, mutually defined next steps.
This is mastery of influence, and it's built on linguistic precision.
Exactly.
But now, we have to shift gears. We have to deliver a very critical word of caution here.
This might be the most important part of the discussion.
Because the biggest trap for anyone who's trying to build this kind of advanced vocabulary is, well, it's sounding pompous or pretentious.
Right. C2 proficiency isn't just about knowing the big words. It's about having the social ear.
The social ear. I like that. What do you mean by that?
It's the most important skill we teach in professional communication.
Yeah.
It's calibration. It's knowing not just what a word means, but when the situational stakes are high enough for that word to add genuine, necessary value.
And when it's just overkill.
When it's overkill, that completely damages your credibility and makes you look out of touch.
Okay, let's dedicate some serious time to this social ear concept. Where do these words fail spectacularly? Give us some examples of misuse, starting with a really low-stakes environment.
Okay, the classic failure is mistaking formality for sophistication. Let's say you're chatting with a colleague on Slack about lunch.
Okay.
And they ask if the office microwave is working. And you reply, I am fully cognizant of the microwave's operational status and believe that our reliance on it may prove ultimately equivocal for overall team nutrition.
Laugh said, okay, you would be immediately muted by everyone on that channel.
You'd be the office meme for a week. You've just injected high-stakes corporate jargon into a completely zero-stakes social interaction.
You sound like a robot analyzing a cafeteria appliance. The linguistic weight does not match the gravity of the subject matter at all.
Not even close. You've just signaled that you lack basic self-awareness.
Okay, let's take a slightly higher stakes context, but one where it's still inappropriate. Say, a casual performance review for a junior employee. They're doing decent work, but they need some minor administrative improvements.
Right. And you sit them down and say, we need to find solutions to ameliorate your spreadsheet data entry performance.
Oof, that's just... It's overkill. You're using conflict resolution language for what is a simple training issue.
You've made a minor skill gap sound like a structural disaster for the company. You have created unnecessary panic.
And probably damaged that person's confidence completely.
For no reason. In that scenario, you just say, hey, we need to work on improving your data entry speed. The word ameliorate implies the existence of some deep negative condition that needs mitigating, which just isn't the case here. You've scared a junior employee for no good reason.
What about using equivocal with people who aren't your peers? Let's say you're managing a very young team and a junior analyst gives you a report that's a little bit vague.
Calling their work equivocal in your feedback might be technically accurate, but it's poor leadership. Because it's not a teaching moment, it's a power move. It's better to say, your conclusion here lacks specificity, or could you clarify the variables you used? Using equivocal there feels like an unnecessary display of superior vocabulary.
So you're damaging the coaching relationship.
You are. These words are best used in peer-to-peer conversations, or as we saw with Mark, in a subordinate to superior dialogue where precision is absolutely mandatory and expected from both sides.
So the rule of thumb should be something like, use these words when the consequence of miscommunication is significant.
Yes.
When ambiguity, when being equivocal, has real financial or professional implications. When understanding the full impact, being cognizant, is mandatory for responsible action.
And when actively diffusing high tension or ameliorating a situation is crucial for maintaining a key relationship.
It has to be surgical.
It has to be an intentional tool, not just a stylistic flourish. When you use equivocal to challenge a vendor on their contract terms, you are saving your company money. When you use cognizant to recognize a star employee's efforts, you are preserving valuable talent. When you use ameliorate to restructure a tense negotiation, you are buying critical time and goodwill.
They are tools for agency.
That's the perfect way to describe it. They allow you to take control of a confusing or frustrating narrative by objectively naming the underlying structural issue in the conversation.
So you stop feeling frustrated by a situation and you start addressing the structural problem inherent in the communication itself.
That is the entire framework. Language shapes our reality. And by meticulously architecting your professional conversations with these precise tools, you are proactively shaping professional outcomes in your favor. You're moving past those emotional roadblocks and towards structured, clearly defined next steps.
So we've established that this kind of linguistic precision is not just about complexity or sounding smart. It's about strategic control. These words are meant to impress people.
Not at all.
They're meant to clarify, to acknowledge, and to resolve high-stakes issues with efficiency.
Which brings us to your final challenge for this deep dive. We really want you to stop just passively absorbing this content and start actively applying this knowledge immediately in your own professional world.
Okay, so take a moment right now. Think about a negotiation you're in, a project timeline, or maybe a significant personal commitment that you're currently facing that just feels intentionally vague, non-committal.
Find a situation in your life that is distinctly equivocal.
Then, step 2, identify the key facts, the full context, and the long-term painful implications of that equivocation. How can you demonstrate, either just to yourself or to the other people involved, that you are fully cognizant of the facts?
What is the gravity of the situation? What's the necessary context? What information do you possess that they might be minimizing or downplaying?
And finally, based on that comprehensive understanding, identify one strategic, active step you can take right now to ameliorate the immediate outcome, for yourself or for others involved.
And remember, this step might not fix the root, long-term problem. That's not always the goal of amelioration, but it must tangibly improve the current condition of the negotiation or the environment.
We want to encourage you to seek out opportunities where these high-stakes words are actually necessary, where a lack of clarity could cost you money, or time, or trust.
Practice using them surgically. Observe the reaction they generate, and recognize how they can immediately shift the power dynamic and the entire trajectory of a conversation towards concrete, positive action.
Keep testing those boundaries. Keep building your own linguistic bridges. Keep transforming that vague internal feeling of frustration into a precise, objective, and highly actionable critique.
Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive into conversational architecture. We really hope these tools serve you well as you navigate the gray areas of influence and negotiation.
Until next time, keep diving deep, and most importantly, keep refining that powerful voice of yours. We'll see you in the next deep dive.
You ever been in one of those conversations at work that just feels slippery? You know, the ones where it sounds like promises are being made, but when you look closer, nothing was actually promised at all? Well, today we're moving past basic vocabulary. We're going to dive into strategic communication for those really tricky gray area moments. Let's get into it. Okay, so picture this. Your manager pulls you aside and says a promotion is coming your way in the near future. It sounds amazing, right? But hold on. What does near future even mean? Next month? Next quarter? Next year? It's a classic high-stakes dilemma. And if you play it wrong, you could end up feeling totally stuck and frustrated. But here's the good news. There is a way through this. And it's not about getting aggressive or demanding. Nope. It's all about being precise. We're going to unpack 3 incredibly powerful words that can help you turn that fuzzy, vague uncertainty into a crystal clear path forward. So our first move is all about pinpointing the problem, without picking a fight. And that leads us to our very first word for today, equivocal. Think of equivocal as the smarter, more strategic cousin of unclear or vague. It doesn't just mean something is confusing, it suggests something is intentionally ambiguous. It's the perfect word for a promise that, let's be honest, isn't really a promise at all.
And there it is, the classic line. This is the very definition of an equivocal statement. It's designed to make you feel good, to feel encouraged. But if you look at the words, it commits to absolutely nothing. It's a conversational brick wall, unless, of course, you know exactly how to respond.
Now, look at this. This is a masterful response. By calling the timeline equivocal, the employee isn't accusing the manager of anything. They're just professionally pointing out that the language itself is too ambiguous to build a real plan on. It's a brilliant, non-confrontational move that basically forces the conversation towards clarity. Okay, so the ball is officially back in the manager's court. The employee has called for clarity. Now, to keep this conversation moving forward, the manager really needs to show they understand the employee's true value. And that brings us to our second word, cognizant. So let me introduce you to cognizant. Think of it as the upgraded, more sophisticated version of just being aware. See, being aware is kind of passive. Yeah, you know about something. But being cognizant, that implies you've really processed the information. You understand its weight, its importance. It's a much deeper level of understanding. Let's really feel the difference here. If a manager says, "I know you worked hard," that's nice, but it feels a little like small talk, right? But what if they say they are cognizant of your contributions? Whoa, that lands differently. That signals some serious professional respect. It says, I don't just see you, I understand the full scope of what you do, and I take it seriously.
And there's the manager's reply. Notice how they use cognizant and then immediately pair it with a specific example. That's key. Right there, the manager validates the employee's true value. The whole tone of the conversation has just shifted. We've gone from vague platitudes to a real negotiation between 2 respected professionals.
All right, so the ambiguity is gone, the value is on the table. We're making progress. But what happens if the manager still can't deliver that promotion right this second? Maybe there's a budget freeze. That's where our third and final word comes in, and this one is all about finding a real-world solution.
Meet ameliorate. I love this word. It's not about fixing a problem, because sometimes you can't just snap your fingers and fix it. We use ameliorate when we're dealing with a tough, unsatisfactory situation, like a promotion delay, and we want to talk about actively making that bad situation better, or at least a little more bearable.
And this is a fantastic move. The manager uses ameliorate to acknowledge, hey, I know this isn't the ideal outcome, but then they immediately offer real, concrete steps to improve things. This is no longer an empty promise. It's an active, good faith effort to make things better, and it's how you keep a great employee motivated and engaged.
Okay, let's pull all of this together. Let's zoom out for a second. What we've just walked through isn't just a list of 3 fancy words. No way. It's a complete, repeatable strategy, a kind of conversational architecture that you can use in any high-stakes discussion. This is your roadmap. It's how you get from frustration to a real resolution. Step 1, identify. You have to call out that equivocal language. Step 2, acknowledge. Both sides need to show they're cognizant of the real value and facts on the table. And finally, step 3, improve. Find a concrete way to ameliorate the situation, even if a perfect fix isn't possible right now. Now, a quick word of caution here. These words are like precision tools, okay? They're not a sledgehammer you use for everything. If you're at brunch and you declare that you're cognizant of the salt levels in this avocado toast, you're probably just going to sound pretentious. The key here is social awareness. You use these words surgically when the stakes are high and clarity is absolutely everything. So that's our strategic toolkit for today, and I want to leave you with this question to chew on. What equivocal situation in your own work life could use a better outcome? Think about that vague promise or that fuzzy timeline you've been given, because now you have a framework to navigate it and to get the clarity and respect you deserve.